on earth fighting for what is just and right. There's no political event in the last 30 years that took place that I wasn't part of. Which experience do you need more?
Okay, gentlemen.
Oh, Mr. SOWORE, you are most welcome once again.
Thank you so much, sir.
You alluded to the U.S., where you have both structures and institutions working.
Yes.
Here in Nigeria, such do not take place. Do you think you'll be able to use the same parameters that the leaders in U.S., South Africa you alluded to?
When Mandela became
let me finish,
yes,
if you give me a chance.
No problem.
Do you think you can use the same parameters that are used in these nations in Nigeria that is so complex and has refused to grow beyond what you think? Minus that, you said during your opening that each leader we have is worse than
the last one. Yes.
If you are to tell me in details, what indices did you use to arrive at your conclusion?
Well, I'll start with your last position. I read in the newspaper today that President Goodluck Jonathan is calling Buhari incompetent. You know, we used to call him incompetent. In fact, the economists describe him as a buffoon at a point. This is the Economist newspaper. But he is so comfortable today that he could call his successor incompetent. That's just to tell you, because this one is contemporary. You know, but let me go back to the issues you raised. You see, institutions and structures are not built on their own. They are built by men of character. When you're talking about the U.S., what is keeping the U.S. going is not just those institutions. It's the character of men that are occupying the institutions, or those ones who have historically built the institutions. If you look at the U.S. today, if the U.S. were to be Nigeria, Mueller would have been sacked. I mean, the special prosecutor, I mean, the special counsel who is looking into the Russian meddling with the election. It's not as if President Donald Trump can't sack him. But the country's conscience, which is behind his institution, his history and pedigree, will not allow that to happen. Men who are working with him, who have to advise him, who know that there will be consequences if they even give such an advice, will not allow him to do that, because they know that there are chains of commands that will suffer for it if that were to happen. But you talk about South Africa. When Mandela came, South Africa was an apartheid state. It was the courage of his conviction and morality that helped to open up the space for black participation. If it wasn't Mandela, it would have been a different story. So the institutions are there. They are still there today. But it took one man, Mandela, to change South Africa from an apartheid state to a democratic state. Those are what we talk about. That's why I'm not here talking about my years as a student union leader, which could count for experience, because I did better than most state governors when I was a student leader, honestly, in this country. Because at the time in this country, the duty of bringing about democracy, which was what was most important for Nigeria, was on our shoulders when we were in our 20s. But there were military administrators all over the place who were jostling around stealing money. There were civilians who were helping the military suppress our democratic aspirations. But nobody counted as experience. That is experience. I tell people, if I were to be an army in the army, I would have been retired by now as a full-star general, going by the number of wars I fought and the scars that I had to show for 30 years of consistently fighting. But here, who cares? You know, people are looking at those who destroy the country, and we are rewarding them on a daily basis with socio-political promotions. We are giving them titles. We called some of them GCON, GCFR, and you look at what they did, they destroyed this country. But for those of us who have fought on the side of rights, what do we get? We get derided. They ask me, where's your experience? Some people will even ask me, why don't you go and run for local governments? You understand? And this country is being run by people who never did half of what I did. In fact, in honesty and